Granblue Fantasy Relink is massive in many respects, especially when it comes to playable characters. With 17 playable at release, it will be overwhelming for a lot of new players in terms of choosing their main to progress or when making decisions about team composition. In this video, we'll be going over the first 10 available characters in the Granblue Fantasy Relink Demo, so players will get an idea of how each of them work, what they bring to the table in terms of roles, playstyles, and more. If you've been having trouble deciding which character to play in Granblue Fantasy Relink, or you just want more information about the characters to help you decide, this video is for you. Before we get into the characters themselves, however, the best course of action is to define character roles in Granblue Fantasy Relink. Players should carefully build their team according to their character roles, especially when tackling endgame content, as endgame fights will be harder and will require a well-balanced functional team in order to succeed. Starting with the staple and most popular role is the attack type. Attack characters have only one role, and this role is to deal substantial damage to enemies or focus on DPS in general. Obviously, all characters deal damage, but attack characters are equipped with hard-hitting skills that can mostly be executed in combinations. Next are support characters. As the name implies, support-type characters are in charge of keeping the party in good shape, and most of the time patch them up with restorative skills or even apply helpful buffs, which drastically improve party members' effectiveness. And lastly, some characters can deal damage and provide support buffs to their companions or even debuff enemies. They're usually known as the glue or hybrid unit in a certain party. One quick example is Gran, which can buff the party with a damage mitigation buff or heal them while also having access to offensive skills. Now that the character types are out of the way, let's move on to the individual characters of Granblue Fantasy Relink. As mentioned previously, we'll be covering all the characters' playstyles, how they are being used in combat, and advisable skill rotations, so you'll have an idea of which character will match your playstyle. We'll begin with the main protagonist, Gran, who is also known as the Captain. Gran harnesses the power of wind and imbues his sword to deal damage to targets. Aside from damage-dealing skills, he also has access to supportive skills that can provide damage-mitigating effects or even heal allies, making him well-rounded and a beginner-friendly character. His power raise attack can be charged to deal a flurry of attacks to the target, and its charge time quickens when charged immediately after landing a combo finisher. Adept Arts is his unique ability, which is raised after landing combo finishers. The higher the Adept Arts level reaches, the more effective his combat skills are. Since Gran's overall skill efficacy relies on Adept Arts level, I usually employ normal attack combos and finishers to reach higher Adept Arts levels. When I reach Adept Arts level 4, I will then use Armor Break to lower the enemy's defense. Do another set of combination attacks till the arts level reaches 4 again, and blast targets with Decimate. The gameplay here is straightforward in terms of using attack skills. On the other hand, if Gran or your party members need healing, Panacea will cover it. His damage mitigating skill Phalanx is excellent at lowering incoming damage. Useful for incoming AoE attacks if you cannot get out of the way. Having access to moderately quick attack combinations and supportive skills, Gran is a great choice for those who are new to the game and are just learning its mechanics. Next is Rackam, one of the few range damage dealers in Granblue Fantasy Relink. His range damage is great in all aspects, and he can inflict defense down to targets and buff himself with damage multipliers. After bolstering his attack, he can rain down bullets and explosions on targets. His skills and normal attacks accumulate his heat gauge, and the higher the heat gauge, the more his bullseye blast will do damage to targets. Rackam is one of the easiest DPS characters to use in Granblue Fantasy Relink, since players will be following a simple skill rotation while paying attention to his heat gauge. At the start of battle, what I usually do is cast Wild Gunsmoke to increase my attack and critical hit rate significantly, hit targets with Spitfire to lower their defense, cast Bullet Hail for damage, and lastly spam Bullseye Shot until the unlimited heat gauge buff expires. I usually don't use range damage dealers in ARPGs, but Rackam is simply fun to use and he completely changed my mind. Beginners and advanced players will love to use him, especially if they want to play with firearms. Up next is Katalina. Katalina is a knight who relies on water skills to deal damage to targets while wielding a magic sword that can swiftly do multiple thrusting combos on enemies that can also be strengthened by Ares. She provides AoE heals in times of need and can even cast invulnerability to the whole party. Having both offensive and support types of skills in Katalina's repertoire, she is shaping up to be one of the best hybrid characters in Granblue Fantasy Relink. Using Katalina is pretty straightforward. You need to focus on Katalina's Ares gauge. When it reaches full, players can decide how they will use Ares. This mighty being can improve skill effects immensely. For instance, using the Light Wall skill provides invulnerability only to herself, but when Ares is present, it can be applied to the whole party. I usually do normal attacks and combo finishers to fill the Ares gauge, and when it's ready, I use it on whatever skill the situation demands. If I need damage or I rush into a certain target, Enchanted Lance is perfect for this situation, while Frozen Blade is perfect when hitting targets from a distance. If the party badly needs to be patched up, use Heal in combination with Ares and a substantial AoE heal will be cast on the party. Players who love support-type characters will like Katalina, though she is a good all-around character in general. The ability to cast invulnerability to the whole party is valuable for any team composition, especially in challenging fights. The next character on the list is Charlotta. Even though she has a supportive skill, I see her as a pure light damager. Charlotta is equipped with hard-hitting skills that can relentlessly burst down targets if used correctly. Her attack buff gives her the ability to grow even stronger over time, and normal attacks can be prolonged by repeatedly pressing the square button and can end with mighty combo finishers. Activating skills, performing link attacks, or performing rapid attacks makes her attacks even stronger. She also can block attacks by performing noble strategy when timed correctly. When the battle starts, I usually cast Valiant Stance first to take advantage of the additional attack buff it provides. The attack bonus grows stronger over time if I manage to not get hit in combat. Following up with Shining Onslaught to deal damage and inflict defense down to the target, and then quickly use Sword of Lumiel, prolonging its animation for more damage, and finally finishing the rotation with Holy Ladder. If executed properly, Charlotta can shred targets and deal tons of damage to bosses. Her speedy attack and skill combinations are so satisfying and engaging to use. Her overall gameplay is perfect for those who want to crank up their damage at every opportunity. Being rewarded for not getting hit is a huge plus as well, and if you enjoy high-risk, high-reward gameplay, this character is for you. Let's move on to the next character, which is Narmaya. Narmaya is a blade master who relies on high-damaging unsheathing skills. She can effortlessly disengage from the enemy or immediately re-engage targets with swift dash attacks. Narmaya can access Dawnfly stance and Free Flutter stance anytime in combat, and each of these stances allow her to perform a different set of normal attack combinations. Her overall damage can drastically be increased by accumulating butterflies after performing specific movesets like executing the entire Dawnfly stance normal attack combination, or by landing charged attacks when in Free Flutter stance. I usually use Dawnfly stance's normal attack combination and accumulate butterflies. After gaining 2 or 3 butterflies, I will assess the situation and determine what skill would be best at the moment. It's easy to determine which skill to use though. Kyo Kasui Getsu closes the gap between you and the target, and Crescent Moon does the exact opposite, which unleashes a long-range slash while jumping away from the enemy, a perfect skill if you want to avoid a certain mechanic or disengage from your target. Setsuna is a straightforward wide-arcing draw attack that can deal tons of damage if you charge it to the full. Perfect for hitting multiple targets or dealing huge damage to bosses. Lastly, the Apex of Nothingness allows Narmaya to parry incoming attacks and counter them with a devastating hit. It's easy to use since the parry window is so generous to the point that anyone can do it. Players who love to execute well-timed attacks or counters will be addicted to this character, plus she can also move gracefully in combat. However, unlocking her full potential in combat may require practice when compared to some other characters in Granblue Fantasy Relink, making her perfect for those who are looking for more advanced gameplay. A very well-designed character overall. Up next is Ghandagoza. Ghandagoza is a pure beast that pummels enemies with his mighty gauntlets, and he relies on well-timed strikes to further increase his damage. Most of Ghandagoza's skills can cover a wide range, perfect for crowd control or clearing enemy waves. Although he is slow in terms of attack animations, his damage can compensate for it, and his playstyle will require a lot of charging, making him a little bit technical to use. When it comes to skills, most of them are straightforward. He does have a parry skill, but I decided to rely on his slow inflicting skill instead. What I usually do when the battle starts is to cast True Avidya to strengthen the whole party and then lunge through enemies by using his Iron Shoulders. Following up with Arhat Skybreaker to deal massive AoE damage, and lastly activate Infernal Stomp to inflict slow to enemies. Once all the skills have been exhausted, I'll start doing normal attacks to fill his Eternal Gauge, and once it's at max, I will use Raging Fist to deal tons of damage to targets. Ghandagoza's playstyle reminds me of how Rackam is used in combat. Both rely on a certain gauge to make their special attacks stronger. Though as I mentioned previously, he is indeed slow, but his high damage multipliers can make up for it. Beginners may find his gameplay a little advanced since timing attack strikes may be clunky for some players. But the biggest caveat is his Raging Fist special attack, which will force players to charge in front of an enemy, making them open to attacks. This is surely one of those high-risk, high-rewards gameplay scenarios. Up next is Siefried. Another character with brute strength, Siefried is a great sword user and yet nimble in combat. Players will have a lot of mobility here, especially when lunging through enemies, and his special ability, Drachenblut, makes him unable to be interrupted while performing triangle attacks or combo finishers. Like Ghandagoza, he relies heavily on well-timed normal attacks to get the most damage, but Siefried is faster. Once the player gets the hang of his attack timing, scoring high damage numbers will be a regular thing. Not to mention he can stun enemies to deal even more damage thanks to his frequent link attacks. What I usually do when the battle starts is to cast Man Against to buff Siefried with attack and defense boost. Rush into the target by using the skill Uwe, and start damaging enemies with normal attacks. Squeeze a Nella Nav and ready my La Ombre de Here to parry and counter incoming attacks. That was a mouthful. Siefried is a little bit technical to use like Ghandagoza and is a little bit trickier to get the most out of him. The main difference is Siefried can do wide arcing swings that cover a wide range, and his ability to quickly stun targets is extremely valuable to the party. Siefried does have slow attack animations, but his high damaging attacks can compensate for it, while giving the player great mobility in combat. If you can adjust to his demanding gameplay, you will have a lot of fun with his character. Next is Yodarha, a speed demon who shreds his targets with a lightning speed flurry of attacks. He can also maneuver on the battlefield effortlessly thanks to his skills. His unique ability lets him accumulate triple shroud marks, which enhances his skill's effects. Yodarha can also buff the party with a damage nullifier so they can tank a specific number of hits. When the battle starts, I usually cast Awakening first so I can rush into enemies and do normal combos to gain triple shroud marks. Once I have at least 2 marks, I will then activate Empty Mist and hold it as long as I can for maximum damage, following up with Flashing Void to deal even more damage. I see Yodarha as a beginner-friendly character. His quick animations are so satisfying to watch while also giving players a lot of freedom in terms of maneuverability. His Hymn of Hundreds skill can provide damage nullifying buffs to the entire party, which can be a lifesaver, especially when just starting. Players who love fast-paced gameplay will surely include Yodarha in their selection. The next character on the list is Io. Io is equipped with multi-elemental spells that can perform well in different scenarios. Not only can these spells deal more damage by taking advantage of elemental weaknesses, but Io spells can also inflict debuffs on targets. She can also heal party members over time by casting healing puddles on the ground. In terms of unique abilities, Io has access to a nuking spell which is called Stargaze. This spell can hit for great damage when fully charged. When using a skill or hitting enemies with a fully charged normal attack, Io gains a Mystic Vortex orb. When she has enough orbs, Stargaze is chargeable up to 4 times. What I usually do at the start of combat is cast Concentration to quicken my charge time and then cast Fire Spell which lowers enemy defenses, following up with Stargaze after that. Cast Lightning to inflict Paralyze on targets, and finish it off with another Stargazer. If the team needs healing, the skill Healing Winds can do the job. Players who enjoy fighting and supporting their allies from a distance will find Io their favorite. Nuking enemies with hard-hitting spells is satisfying, especially if you manage to unleash fully charged Stargaze, but she is a mage, so expect long charging times. I find her recovery spell a little bit lacking, although I understand it heals over time. The healing puddle is somewhat limited. This could be an issue when fighting bosses that constantly move around, so I see the skill as a bonus in most cases, and likely won't be the focus of her gameplay. Moving on to Lancelot, who is capable of dealing fast damage to targets. All of his skills can easily be used in combat, so dishing out combos will be natural for this speed demon. He is capable of prolonging his combos, which get stronger over time thanks to his special ability, the Stiller Glands. He also can dodge enemies while in the middle of a combo. What I usually do when the battle starts is to cast the skill Cult Swinger to freeze my targets, following with Blade of Impulse to rush into the enemy and cast Turbulence, and do a normal attack combination. The main goal of his gameplay is to deal damage every second with chainable attack combinations. The majority of players will love Lancelot because he is so easy to use. Adjusting to his gameplay will not be an issue, since most of his skills are pretty straightforward. In most cases, I find Lancelot's overall gameplay works like Yodarha with much less timing mastery, but also with less speed. The last character on the list is Zeta, a master of spear who wields the power of fire. Zeta's playstyle is unique and heavily relies on counters and timing to reach her maximum damage potential. This nimble warrior fights in midair most of the time and deals damage by taking advantage of her attack loops. Most of her skills always jump back into midair to continue her attack loop, which grows stronger at each successive attempt. Zeta's playstyle is pretty advanced in most cases. Although her parries or counters are easy to pull off due to her skills having a generous window in which to successfully use them, it is her attack loop that requires precise timing and practice. The said loop is where she gets the majority of her damage, so it is a must to master it. I usually start the fight by buffing the party with Signo Drive, which buffs attack boost, and casting Infinite Wonders to inflict her special debuff on the target. Then I will cast Spear of Arvis to rush into targets and start the attack loop in midair and try my best to sustain the loop as much as I can. Realms of Majesty can easily be used to parry counter any incoming attacks, which launches Zeta into midair as well to do the attack loop once again. Advanced users will surely love Zeta, and there's no doubt that she is one of the best pure DPS in Granblue Fantasy Relink. It will require practice to master her, but it will pay off tremendously. for mid-air loop attacks can deal tons of damage, especially when maintained properly. So that wraps up our video on the characters of Granblue Fantasy, or at least the 10 that are playable in the demo, to give you some idea of what they can do, how to play them, whether they're good to use for you or not, so you can help decide, whether that's a character that you want to play, or maybe you want to focus on another one instead. Stay tuned for more Granblue Fantasy Relink coverage on this channel as we edge closer and closer to launch on February 1st, and let me know if there's any guides or anything that you would like to see us cover for this game. And also remember, there is a demo out currently that you can play on PlayStation, so if you have a PlayStation, I highly urge you to go try it out if you like what you see.